Xavier says, are you a fan of dark humor jokes and or memes? I'm not really into memes, but I like dark humor, but less as I get older. I used to like sort of dark, edgy stuff when I was younger, and then as time goes by, although I heard something the other day that absolutely split my sides, and this is total dark humor, right? It was a so like if you don't like dark humor, you're probably not going to like this. But it was Ricky Gervais and Sam Harris on these little podcasts they're posting where they just have a talk for about 40 minutes, and they're talking about the nature of humor and offense. And Ricky tweeted out, what jokes are unacceptable? And the reply he got was losing 2 kids, and it just split me in two. I burst into laughter. Okay? Now, losing 2 kids is incredibly tragic, and that's in no way what I'm laughing at. But like for me, nothing is off limits with jokes, right? You can joke about anything. Doesn't mean the joke's funny, and it'll be funny to some people and not to others, but I just don't think there's a need for a line in the sand. Often when you joke about dark stuff, for me it's almost like a way of confronting what is dark and dealing with it, like having power over it because you turn it into humor. Waterfall Cat says, I don't get it. Let me explain. So the reason I found it funny is because that, first of all, that person isn't trying to make a joke. Sometimes some of the funniest things happen when people aren't trying to be funny. The second thing is like they've drawn a line in the sand, okay? So like why 2? Because 1 would be pretty awful. Losing, like, no one wants to lose a child, right? But they've cut the line at 2, at losing 2 children, and that is really odd. So like in confronting the idea of what is or isn't funny, or sorry, is too offensive or beyond like what's reasonable, someone's drawn a line in their head at losing 2 children, which implies that losing 1 is okay. Losing a child is not okay. Like, and that's just what I found so incredibly amusing about it. I mean, also at the same time, you know, you got to think that this person might have said that because they had lost 2 children, which is like very sad, obviously. And the other thing about dark humor, I think, is important to not make it personal. Like, you wouldn't joke about someone who lost 2 children. You joke about it in the abstract. You know, like you don't put it on someone. You don't joke about someone's tragedy, but you can joke about a tragedy. In my opinion, like that's my own personal way. That's my own personal take on it. Obviously, these rules are completely subjective, right? And arbitrary. 12 Bamboo says, oh, I get it now. Yeah. It's more of like an observation of how people think about stuff that is amusing in that particular instance for me. I think dark humor is fine until it's targeted and someone goes through something or another or jokes about another. It's not okay. It's totally abstract, then it's mostly okay. Yeah, that's how I feel as well, right? Like once you make it personal, it's just sort of not on because it's like you're actually like pointing very directly, but in the abstract it's much more amusing. What about the Holocaust? Do you think it's okay or bad? Again, like it's the act of drawing the line in the sand that is generally what drives amusement about these things. Again, like if you made a Holocaust joke to a Holocaust survivor or victim, that would be incredibly insensitive and not right. But if you joke about it in the abstract, I mean, again, like I think dark humor is often a like a defense mechanism against things that are dark. Like no one likes the Holocaust or thinks it's good in any way. It's a terrible, terrible thing. It shows the worst of what people can do. But joking about it, for me, if the joke is funny and done right, is not to joke about the Holocaust. It's to kind of have strength in the face of it. Like jokes kind of diminish the power of things. Like everyone has a little joke about death or dying from time to time, right? And often it's more a way of like shielding yourself from it. And then I guess for some people, like the threshold of what's acceptable there is bigger or smaller, right? And you know, the other thing about dark humor is like if someone was like, hey, I really don't like this, I think you should be able to respect that to some extent as well and be like, okay, you know, not everyone gets these things the same way one person might do. Do you think telling jokes about bad things reminds us what not to do? Yeah, like I feel like a joke about something dark is, also a reminder of that's not who we are. I don't know. That's just my interpretation of it all, right? Dark humour is how many people cope with terrible things. The London tube bombing and bus bombings of 7/7 came on one day after London won their bid for the 2012 Olympics, beating France. One of the first things I heard on the news of the bombing broke was, I didn't think France would be that annoyed. Yeah. Yeah, it's a way of dealing with it, right? Dark humour is a very British way to cope with uncomfortable subjects, is Loldale. Yeah, a lot of British humour, though, it's... a lot of British humour punches down. It's like self-deprecating a lot of the time, or about like losing. Like in a show like 40 Towers, or what's they called? Del Boy. What's the show? Only Fools and Horses. Goodness me. Like they don't ever really like win or achieve or succeed. Like the jokes are always in how they fail and get things wrong and mess up and say stupid stuff, right? In-Betweeners, that's a modern great example, right? That's all about the shenanigans they get into that are just brutal. If they were real, there's brutal things they get into that are difficult. Whereas like other humor tends to be a lot more up-punching and uplifting. So it's like, yeah, it's definitely a more British thing. Monty Python. Yeah, Monty Python has a lot of that. It has a lot of goofy as well in it. A lot of sort of slapsticky, kind of goofy sense of humour. But again, yeah. Bottom fits that description, Susanna Bombanana. Yeah. Like, literally, it's like a very common thing. Most British comedies will fit that. Like, would people consider Scrubs a comedy? That American TV show about the doctors, right? Not doctors. What are they? No, I forget what they call them, where they're like gonna become doctors. It definitely is, says Badger, yeah. You see, in that show, it's all warm-hearted and uplifting, right? Same with Friends as well, although Friends is one of those ones that has not aged very well. With a character like Ross, it's got a bit of down-punching, but a lot of the time, like, most of the jokes and the humour, kind of like, they're in comfortable lives and whatnot. Badger says there's still some dark stuff in Scrubs. Yeah, the dark moments tend to not be the jokes, right? They tend to be the more emotional, life lesson-y parts, as I remember it. But yeah, that's like a big difference between the two types of humour, is like the down-punching and then the sort of more light-hearted, warm sense of comedy. You don't get a lot of that coming out of Britain, at least that I've not noticed. Not that I'm like, comedy's my thing and I'm all on top of it, but of what I've grown up and seen, there's like not a lot of that warm, spirited sort of stuff coming from over here.